We start with the most feared tank of World War II, the Tiger I. When this 57-ton monster rolled onto the battlefield in 1942, Allied tankers thought they were facing something from science fiction. The 88mm gun could destroy any Allied tank from over a mile away. The armor was so thick that most Allied shells just bounced off. There are countless stories of single Tigers holding off entire tank battalions. In one famous incident in Normandy, a single Tiger commanded by SS officer Michael Whitman destroyed 14 tanks and 15 personnel carriers in 15 minutes. Allied commanders issued orders. If you see a Tiger, don't engage, call for air support. But here's the dark secret behind the legend. Germany only built about 1,300 Tigers during the entire war. Why so few? Because each one was handcrafted like a luxury car. They were absurdly expensive. One Tiger cost as much as 4 Panthers or 8 Panzer IVs. And they were maintenance nightmares. A Tiger needed constant repairs. It drank fuel like a college student on spring break. German logistics couldn't keep them supplied. By 1944, more Tigers were abandoned due to mechanical failure or lack of fuel than were destroyed by enemy fire. The Tiger I represents everything about Germany's war. Technologically superior, tactically devastating, strategically idiotic. They built a tank that could win battles, but couldn't win the war. Now let's talk about the tank that actually won the war, the Soviet T-34. June 1941. Germany invades the Soviet Union expecting easy victories. Then German tank commanders encounter the T-34 and panic sets in. Their reports back to Berlin sound almost hysterical. Enemy tank has sloped armor our guns cannot penetrate. It moves faster than our tanks. It operates in conditions that disable our vehicles. The T-34 was revolutionary. That sloped armor? It meant a shell hitting at an angle would deflect rather than penetrate. The wide tracks distributed weight, so it didn't get stuck in mud or snow like German tanks. The diesel engine was reliable in extreme cold and less likely to catch fire than gasoline engines. But here's what made it a war winner. It was simple. Soviet factories churned out over 84,000 T-34s during the war. 84,000. Compare that to Germany's 1,300 Tigers. Soviet crews could be trained in weeks. Repairs were simple enough that field mechanics could do them under fire. Was it comfortable? Hell no. The crew compartment was cramped, loud, and visibility was terrible. Early versions didn't even have radios. Commanders gave orders by waving flags. The ride was so rough that crews suffered from constant bruising and exhaustion. But it didn't matter. When one T-34 was destroyed, 3 more appeared. Germany couldn't kill them fast enough. Soviet factories in the Urals, safely beyond German bomber range, worked 24/7. Women, teenagers, and elderly workers who'd never seen a tank before were building them. The T-34 proved that in total war, good enough in massive quantities beats perfect in limited numbers. Every single time. The most controversial tank of World War II, America's M4 Sherman. German tankers called it the Tommy Cooker because it caught fire so easily. Shermans nicknamed it the Ronson after a cigarette lighter whose slogan was "Lights first time, every time." American crews knew the statistics. A Sherman versus Tiger duel meant the Sherman crew had about 15 seconds to live. So why did America build 50,000 of them? Because America understood something Germany never did. This wasn't a war of duels, it was a war of logistics. Here's what the Sherman had. It was reliable. It could be shipped anywhere in the world. Parts were standardized and available. Crews could be trained quickly. And it actually started when you turned the key. American doctrine evolved to Sherman's strengths. Don't fight Panthers head-on. Flank them with 5 Shermans. Use infantry support. Call in airstrikes. Overwhelming firepower through sheer numbers and coordination. And here's what nobody talks about. The Sherman was constantly upgraded. Better armor packages. The 76mm gun that could actually hurt German heavy tanks. British versions got even bigger guns. The EZ-8 variant with better suspension and firepower. The Sherman wasn't designed to be the best tank. It was designed to win the war. While German Tigers sat disabled in France waiting for spare parts that would never arrive, Shermans kept rolling. When a Sherman was knocked out, another replaced it within hours. The Sherman proved American industrial might. Germany was fighting a tank war. America was fighting an economic war. And economics always wins. Germany's best overall tank, the Panther. After the shock of encountering T-34s in 1941, Germany's response was to create the ultimate medium tank. The Panther combined Soviet innovations with German engineering precision. Sloped armor like the T-34? Check, but thicker. Powerful gun. The 75mm could penetrate any Allied tank at extreme range. Speed and mobility? It could hit 34 miles per hour despite weighing 45 tons. When it worked properly, the Panther was arguably the best medium tank of the entire war. Allied intelligence was so concerned about Panthers that they created entire training programs specifically for dealing with them. The standard Allied tactic: avoid frontal engagement at all costs, try to flank, aim for side or rear armor, and pray. But the Panther had Germany's signature problem: over-engineering. The first Panthers deployed at the Battle of Kursk in July 1943 were disasters. Engines spontaneously caught fire. Final drives failed after mere kilometers. Transmissions shattered under the tank's weight. Of the 200 Panthers deployed, only 43 were operational after 4 days, and most losses were mechanical, not combat. Germany did eventually fix most of these issues. Late-war Panthers were much more reliable. But by then, Germany was retreating on all fronts. They built about 6,000 Panthers, impressive compared to Tigers, but pitiful compared to 84,000 T-34s or 50,000 Shermans. The Panther shows Germany's fundamental miscalculation. They kept designing better tanks when they needed more tanks. By 1943, the Soviets wanted a heavy tank with one job: smash through German defenses and destroy Tigers. The IS-2, named after Joseph Stalin himself, delivered with brutal simplicity. The 122mm gun was absurdly powerful. It could obliterate Tigers, Panthers, bunkers, buildings, anything. The armor was thick enough to shrug off most German guns. This wasn't a tank for maneuver warfare. This was a breakthrough weapon. But that 122mm gun had a quirk. Ammunition came in 2 pieces, shell and propellant charge loaded separately. Rate of fire was slow, maybe 2 to 3 rounds per minute. In a duel with a Tiger, whoever fired first won. The IS-2's advantage was that when it did hit, the target ceased to exist. Soviet crews told stories about IS-2 shells hitting Tiger turrets and literally blowing them off the hull, sending 10 tons of steel tumbling through the air. German reports confirmed this. They were terrified of encountering IS-2s. About 3,800 were built, and they spearheaded the final Soviet offensives into Germany. When IS-2s appeared, German commanders knew a major assault was coming. These weren't defensive tanks. They were the battering ram of Stalin's revenge. The IS-2 exemplified late-war Soviet doctrine: overwhelming force applied at the decisive point. Subtlety was for people who weren't besieging Berlin. Germany looked at the Tiger Eye and thought, what if we made it bigger? The result was the King Tiger, 70 tons of over-engineered insanity. This wasn't just the most powerful tank of World War II. It was the most powerful tank for a decade after the war ended. The gun could destroy any Allied tank from 2.5 kilometers away. The frontal armor was practically impenetrable. When Allied forces first encountered King Tigers in Normandy in 1944, their reports are almost comical. Standard anti-tank weapons ineffective. Tank appears invulnerable from frontal aspect. Recommend air attack only. But the King Tiger perfectly encapsulates Germany's death spiral. It was too heavy for most bridges. Engineers had to find alternate routes constantly. It was too slow to maneuver, 25 miles per hour maximum on good roads, much slower cross-country. It was too complex to maintain. The engine was overworked trying to move 70 tons, so breakdowns were constant. And it appeared too late. The first King Tigers saw combat in August 1944, when Germany was already collapsing. Only 489 were ever built. More King Tigers were abandoned by their crews due to lack of fuel than were destroyed by enemy action. There's a famous photo of a King Tiger abandoned in a German village, completely intact, with a handwritten sign from the crew: no fuel. That image summarizes Germany's late-war desperation. The world's most powerful tank. Useless because there's no gasoline. The King Tiger proved you can't engineer your way out of losing a war. Britain's Churchill tank was the exact opposite of the King Tiger. Slow, steady, and actually useful. Maximum speed? About 15 miles per hour. A soldier could almost jog alongside it. German tanks could run circles around Churchills. So why did Britain build over 7,300 of them? Because the Churchill was designed for a specific job, infantry support. It wasn't meant to race across open ground. It was built to slowly advance with troops, absorb punishment, and clear obstacles. That boxy design with all-around armor meant it could take hits from any angle, and it could climb terrain that would stop other tanks. The long chassis and special track design let Churchill scale slopes that crews swore were impossible. In the mountains of Italy, Churchills went where nothing else could go. British and Canadian troops loved them because they were reliable. When you're advancing under fire, you don't want speed. You want a mobile fortress that won't break down. The Churchill delivered. One famous incident. A Churchill tank took 80 anti-tank rounds during a single battle and kept fighting. The crew survived. That's the Churchill's legacy. Not glamorous, not fast, but it brought soldiers home alive. Very British approach. Be steady, be reliable, get the job done, have tea afterward. So after millions of tank rounds fired, thousands of tanks destroyed, and 4 years of mechanized warfare, what decided the tank war? Germany built engineering marvels. The Tiger, the Panther, the King Tiger, technologically superior to almost everything the Allies fielded. But they couldn't build enough. They couldn't fuel them. They couldn't supply spare parts. Quality doesn't matter if you can't field an army. The Soviet Union built quantity. The T-34 and IS-2 were good enough, reliable enough, and most importantly, there were enough of them. Soviet factories outproduced Germany's entire economy. For every Tiger Germany built, the Soviets built 65 T-34s. America built logistics. The Sherman wasn't the best tank, but it was everywhere, all the time, with spare parts and fuel and trained crews ready to replace losses overnight. American industry turned tank production into an assembly line process. Britain built for survival. The Churchill wasn't impressive on paper, but it did its job and brought crews home. World War II proved that in total war, logistics beats engineering. Production beats perfection. And the side that can keep tanks running, fueled, and fighting will outlast the side with better tanks that can't move. These 8 tanks didn't just fight World War II. They defined how wars would be fought for the next 50 years. If you want to see every major WW2 aircraft explained next, hit that subscribe button. I'll see you in the next one.